right, so we're out working today. Today's a little bit different. We're in a different location. We're at some property that Michelle's uncle owns, and we are actually going to work on the mechanics of the bus. So we don't know much about it, so we got Scott Crosby, the bus grease monkey, out here with us. And we're going to see, we've got some oil leaks, and just make sure everything's running really well and smooth before we go try to transition to full time. So we're going to get a full kind of clean bill of health, try to check out everything in the engine, check out the brakes, check out the bearings, all that kind of stuff. So we're really looking forward to working with Scott today. All right, so day one is in the books. We worked all day yesterday with Scott, and we got a bunch of the oil leaks in the back taken care of. There was a few loose fittings, there was a few loose adapters, some loose bolts. We went and got some new bolts, some washers, things like that. And that tightened up a bunch of stuff in the back where it had been leaking oil. And then we moved on to the wheel assemblies. And so we went for a test drive, and you can see all of that on Scott's channel, and he's pretty good at documenting just about everything. And so we went for a test drive, and he said, you know, they feel a little bit grindy. And so we took off the wheels, and we actually lifted it up and shook the wheels and see if there's any play. There wasn't a lot of play, but these bearings have obviously been overheated. And so if you look real close at this bearing, you can see the discoloration in the bearings, and so those bearings have been overheated. So we're going to get all new bearings, all new races. And actually the worst part of it was the drums have just been cracked, and so they're in pretty desperate need of replacement. So we're going to replace all the drums, we're going to replace all the brake shoes, clean everything up, and then this should all be kind of like new. So Scott has all the details on his channel, so we will link that in the description. And that was day one. So we're out here, we're having a lot of fun, learning all kinds of stuff about the suspension and about how all this stuff works. So it's been a good time. All right, so day two consisted of taking the whole rear end apart. So we took off all the rear tires, the rear brakes, the rear everything, and just kind of inspected what was up. And so what we did find again was that these drums have been overheated. So you can see all the cracking in there. So today, what we're gonna try to take on is removing the rest of the brakes, all of the brake stuff, the S-cams, the liners, remove the airbags. So we're gonna block it up. So we'll remove the airbags, remove the drums from the hubs, which is kind of a big job. We're gonna have to drill them out. We tried yesterday to use a chisel and some heat, and they wouldn't come out. So we're gonna go ahead and do all that. We're also gonna take care of the power steering. We're gonna put new fluid in it. It does make quite a bit of noise. So hopefully putting a fluid that's not as thick in it will quiet that down. And so that's what's on the job for today. But we had a good time yesterday taking all this stuff apart, and today is more of the same. So it'll be a full day today. All right, so day three is in the books. This is the morning of day four. Yesterday we changed a bunch of hoses, and so I went and bought and had a bunch of these hoses custom made, and some hoses up front that were really cracked pretty bad, as well as some brake hoses that were also looking pretty terrible. So anyway, we've replaced all those. We flushed the power steering with ATF. So it used to have an oil in there. We think it was a 1040 weight oil, but now we have ATF in the power steering. So hopefully that'll quiet down when we first start the bus and it's cold, it makes a lot of noise. So hopefully that'll quiet that down. We also removed most of the drums from the hubs. That was a huge chore. So we had a helper yesterday. There was a guy who came and just volunteered to help us. So he drilled all those out, and we knocked them out of there. And so hopefully we're in a good place for that. Today is going to be more power steering. We're gonna bleed the system again. You've got to bleed it several times by turning the steering wheel back and forth a bunch. So we're gonna do that, as well as just clean up all of the brake gunk. So there's a bunch of just grease and stuff that's been all over the brakes. So you can kind of see here how they're just all gummed up. So we're gonna clean all that up. So we've brought some scrubbers and some scrapers and a bunch of degreaser and stuff to clean all that stuff up. And I think the last thing we're gonna do for today is the airbags. So all these airbags are getting replaced. There's 8 of them. And so we've, the night before last, we made a bunch of blocks so that when the airbags come down, it'll just sit on those blocks. So anyway, that's what.
We have to remove the shocks too.
Oh, we're also gonna remove the shocks, that's right. So that'll be proud that supposedly that's pretty hard. so that's gonna be another chore. So anyway, that's what's planned for today. All right, good morning. So day 4, the overview of day 4 was we removed all the airbags. So all the airbags have been removed. We also removed the shocks, which that took a pretty large part of the day. So the shocks were in pretty bad shape. They're leaking. And so we snapped off quite a few bolts doing that. So we also snapped off a bolt in the transmission fill. So I've got that on order. And Michelle started cleaning. So she cleaned two of the wheels really pretty well. So we're gonna go through and clean the rear ones now. And we've got a bunch of paint that is a rust inhibitor. So we're gonna spray a bunch of this stuff with rust inhibitor and just kind of get that under control. And we've got rubberized undercoating that we're also gonna spray on top of that. And then we're gonna drill out some of the stuff, or actually we're gonna try this technique where we heat up we spin a nut on there, heat it up, weld it on, and then try to get it off with that. So we're gonna try that. We'll see how that works. So we're gonna do that today, hopefully. That's some of the stuff on our list. So we'll see how much of it we get through. All right, day 5 and 6. We forgot to do one yesterday. So anyway, what we've spent time doing is a lot of cleaning, a lot of drilling. So we also, yesterday was a big day because we got all the races. So Scott was able to get all the races off of the old hubs. He was able to get the new ones in. We got all new bearings packed with brand new synthetic grease. We also got the shoes, the liners on the shoes, and started to drill out the shock, so we're able to put that back on. We did try the technique where we welded a high strength nut onto the end of the nub and tried to fill it up with weld, and it just was not strong enough. We even cut like a groove into the middle of the nut just so we'd be able to get more surface area, and I could not make it work. And it's a very real possibility that I'm just not a good enough welder. I'm okay with that, so we went with a different solution and just drilled new holes. So anyway, that's where we're at. So we got a lot of this stuff cleaned up as well and painted. So we have a rust inhibiting paint that we're using to try to just kind of stop the rust that's happening now. Anyway, we also got new brake chambers, but the length on the shaft was not long enough, so we're gonna have to see what we're gonna do about that. But today we're gonna go ahead and concentrate on the shocks, and then get all the airbags in the back, and I think that will probably do it for today. All right, so we're on day 7 or day 8, I don't remember anymore. It's been a long journey, but I wanted to show you where the power steering had started to leak. And so this hose was up underneath the bus, and there was a mounting plate where the screw came up and just met the hose, and over time it had kind of worn a little hole. So there's like a little hole in there. And so I think once we started messing with it and we changed all the cloth lines that went to the power steering, the actual power steering box, I think we had pulled on it just enough to where it kind of just finally gave way and started leaking. So I thought this part was going to be a huge pain because this is very high pressure fluid, so it's power steering. So the manual says it runs at 1500 to 2200 psi or something like that. And so we were really worried because this isn't like the kind of aluminum that you can just go buy, or copper that you can just go buy at the hardware store. It's a lot thicker to handle that increased pressure. And so putting just a normal fitting on here from like Home Depot or Lowe's or something, it was not going to work. It's too much pressure. It wasn't going to hold. And so we went to several specialized hose places, and the first 3 we were pretty discouraged because they said that, look, there's not much we can do unless you replace that entire line with steel or something that they worked with. They were like, there's no way for us to help you. But one place did refer us to a place in Phoenix, and so we traveled all the way up there. And the guy was super helpful, and he was like, oh yeah, we've got several solutions that can solve that. And the first solution he brought out was like 3 or 4 or 5 different fittings, and they were all rated for super high pressure, like hydraulic, like those big construction with the big pistons and stuff. And so that was going to cost like over $150 or something. And so I was like, this is like for an old bus for power steering. He's like, oh, hold on. And he went back and made something else up, and he reused one of our pieces, and it ended up being $21. So we're like, all right, that's more our speed. Anyway, so we got that fixed. It was so hard to reach. It's way up inside. We had to remove a panel, and then it's way up between the frames. And so we had to go up there, and we had to polish this down so there's no corrosion or anything on it, so the fitting would just barely fit on. And so we did that. We got the fitting put on, and then it's a crush one, and so you have to just keep going until you crush the thing on there, but not so far that you destroy it. So there's kind of a finesse thing. And so we got it on there, got it all situated, and turned the engine on and just prayed that it was going to hold, and it did hold. So there was no leaks up front, and so that was fixed. So that was one of the more challenging things we thought we were going to have to deal with. But anyway, we've got a bunch of dead parts here, so old airbags and old brake liners, and we replaced all of the cans because, first of all, they look like this, so they don't look great. But the worst part of it is that these, the angle on them was a little weird, and so you can see here where it's worn through the actual shaft. I don't know if that's going to show up real well on the camera, but there's about a third of this or so is missing the metal. So anyway, we redid all those. We redid all of the rubber brake lines. Anywhere we found a rubber brake line, we replaced it. We also, it turns out that the air throttle in ours was not put in the right location. So I guess what Scott said is, when you put an air throttle on, and that air throttle also goes to the transmission to help with the shifting and things like that, the lines that come from the transmission and from the actuator that actually controls the throttle, those need to be the same length, or you get these weird lags and delays and stuff. And so I crawled up under there, and we rerouted all that stuff, and so that would be equal length. So that was another thing we did. And so now, today we were waiting on parts, and so what we've got to do today is, these are mostly finished. So you can see we got the new brake cans in there with the new lines. We've got all new drums, all new shocks, all new airbags, so all new bearings and seals and all that stuff. So we were waiting on the front because the front for some reason ended up with aluminum shoes. And so the screws then needed to be a little bit longer, and so we had to reorder the screws. And so now we've got the screws. So we're gonna go ahead and put the liners on the front, and then there's a leveling valve on the other side. So what we had noticed is, over about the past 3 months, when we would park our bus for an extended period of time, it would start to slowly sag to the passenger side. And so what Scott said is that's almost always a valve in the rear. If we look at the leveling valves, they're right here. You can see how that one's clean and kind of gold looking. And then look at this one. So whenever they look like that, that means they're leaking. So anyway, we've got a new one of those, and so we've got to install that today as well. And then we see here's the new brake chambers, and we've added some discs or some washers to help the angle a little bit there. So all new pads, bearings, all that stuff. And so we'll be putting in that leveling valve, and we'll be putting on the drums. And is that it? There was one more thing.
I mean, we still have a few things left to do, like bump stops and...
Oh, that's right, bump stops and...
I mean, we got to put the hubs and everything back on the front.
Yep,
we have one more airbag to do.
Yep.
So we're getting close.
It's getting there. So hopefully by tomorrow, it will be in a state where it's ready to roll again. So that's our hope. All right, so what we thought would be a few more days, or one more day, was actually a few more days. The radius rods gave us like a real fight. So those normally, Scott said those normally take about 30 minutes to an hour to change out. You just take out the bolts, slam the new bushings in, put it all back in. But for us, that wasn't the case. I think we broke a couple bolts. And we had one that was in there so hard that we had to actually go to a machine shop to get it pressed out. And there was nothing holding it in. It was just rusted through. So anyway, that took a while. But a few days later, I should say, we finally got it rolling, did a test drive, and the brakes are amazing. So I'm happy to report that everything had worked out and we've got it rolling. She's safe, and we're ready to, the carriage is ready. It's like brand new. All right, so the project is over, and so we'll do a brief overview of everything that was done and all the things that included, as well as what did it all cost? How long did it all take? So first, how long? So we've had several questions about, along the way, because Scott's been documenting the entire build along the way. So the grand total for it all, and we don't have it all really calculated down to the last penny, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $11,000 for parts and labor. And I know that seems like a lot, and it is a lot to spend, on a one-time thing, but we also had that in the budget. So all along, when we first started this whole thing and we're looking for an RV, we had a specific budget, and that budget was well in excess of what this bus cost. So this bus cost us about $11,900, I think, when we first bought it. And with this now another $11,000, we're at $22,900 for the chassis. And when we bought this bus, it came with a set of service records. So we were fairly sure that the engine was in good condition. The transmission had just literally been redone. We know that it had been rebuilt about 50,000 miles ago. We did have a couple of very specific things that we were looking for in a bus after we had done a ton of research. I knew that I wanted Jake brakes, and Michelle knew that she wanted an automatic. And so this has both of those things. And so there was no weird, other than the power steering pump, which I didn't know about, but there was no odd noises. It ran well, it stopped well before, not like it stops now, but it stopped well before. And so we didn't have a cause for alarm. There wasn't things shaking or rattling, and it wasn't making weird noises. And so we didn't, we knew that there's no way we were gonna leave on a trip without having it fully checked out. But there was also no reason for alarm. And so even when I took Scott on the test drive, he said, the bearings, they seem like they're shaking a little bit, but he's like, he wasn't like, oh, pull over, this has got to be addressed immediately. So we didn't really have a big reason for alarm. We do drive it twice a week. So there's a storage lot where we keep it, and then we usually drive it to our house. So it gets driven twice a week. and we make sure that the operating temperature comes all the way up to about 160 before we shut everything down and make sure that we've got it up to operating temperature, which is a lot easier in the summer. Anyway, so the budget, we didn't really have a budget, but we were just going to spend what it took to get it as safe as it could possibly be. All right, so the whole project took about 2 weeks, almost to the day. So Scott and Kelly pulled in on Sunday, they pulled out on Sunday. So almost to the day, 2 weeks total. And that's working Saturday, Sunday, that's working the entire time, trying to get this bus going. And the repairs that were done were, there were several oil leaks in the back that we wanted addressed. And so we ended up putting in a new adapter for the oil filter that was leaking. There was an oil leak up next to the blower, so that was tightened and fixed. Several transmission leaks were addressed and fixed. And the Jake brakes weren't working at 100%. So when I turned on the Jakes for Scott when we were going down the road, he said, well, the Jakes are definitely working, but it doesn't feel like they're working to 100%. So he went in, pulled the head off, or pulled the valve cover off, and then saw immediately that one of the Jakes was not connected on the O-ring. And so that was an easy fix. He literally fixed that in like 5 minutes. And there was also a wire with a bare spot that he also put some stuff over just to make sure that it's not grounding out. So both of those things were addressed in the engine area. The way the air hookup was hooked up, there's supposed to be an equal distance between the throttle mechanism and the transmission, but there was not. It was really short at the T for the throttle and then really long for the transmission. So we rerouted that. And so, but that about does it for the engine part of it. The majority of the work was all suspension and chassis work, and that includes all new bearings, races. Everything was brand new and re-greased. All new airbags, new shocks in the rear, all new brake chambers, all new hoses. So we did also buy a bunch of hoses for the rear where they were looking bad. In the power steering in the front, we also changed all the hoses for that because they were looking kind of crusty. And in that process, we discovered that there was a leak. And so there was a fix up there. We changed all the bushings in the radius rods and all new drums. All of the drums had been overheated and cracking and looked terrible. So we bought all new drums. And so everything below the bus practically is brand new. We will get new tires and maybe new wheels before we take off. So literally everything that's the running gear will be practically brand new. We also greased everything. Scott showed us how to grease everything, and we changed all the fluids. So we changed the transmission fluid from engine oil, which was what was in there, to the recommended synthetic Allison approved oil for the transmission. We changed the power steering fluid from, I think it was a 1040 weight oil to a power steering, or I'm sorry, an ATF fluid, which is approved for this power steering pump. And so I think that about does it. I probably missed a few things, but just off the top of my head, that's, new treadle valve, which is coming for the brakes, and a diaphragm for one of the leaks. But
all new brake liners.
All new brake liners. So all new brake liners, brake chambers, air hoses, all the brake components are brand new. All the wheels and bearings are brand new, as well as the steel hubs. So everything under the bus is practically brand new. So one question that keeps coming up is, why didn't we do all this stuff at the beginning? Why didn't we have this all checked out at the beginning? So if you own one of these old buses, what you'll figure out is it's really cool because it comes with a whole community of people that are willing to help you and help you go through things. And if you have questions, there's a Facebook group and a forum and all kinds of stuff. But there isn't a lot of mechanics that like working on these. So we called several shops, which none of them liked working on these. So we did call Scott about 2 years ago, and we'd heard about him through some of the forums and some of the groups that we're a part of, and he came pretty highly recommended. And so we called him a couple years ago and said, hey, is there any chance that we can get you down to Arizona so that you can look at our bus and just kind of, you know, let us know what the condition of it is. And he was really nice, and we corresponded back and forth, but he just said, look, I'm not going to be in Arizona for quite a while. And so he has a whole waiting list, and so we kind of got put on his waiting list. And then about was it November? It was November or December. He said, I'm gonna come out sometime at the beginning of the year. He said, I'm gonna go through Texas, and there's gonna be an opportunity to work on your bus. And so we said, great. And we said, you know, it's been running great. We don't really have any real problems. We just want you to check it out and just give us the condition of how it is. And so we expected to have him out here for maybe 2, maybe 3 days while we're checking everything out. We fully expected to take the wheels off, repack the bearings, slam it back in, and hey, it's done. Because we could see the brake liners, you can see them from the back, and we knew that it had plenty of pad left, and everything was apparently, like, it was working fine, it's braking fine, it rolls fine, there's no weird noises. So we fully expected that he would just come out here, we would spend a few days, maybe 2, maybe 3 days, repacking bearings and checking out engine and just giving it a clean bill of health, and then he would be on to the next project. I think there was one in Chandler and one in Coolidge that he wanted to get to on this trip too, but we took literally the whole 2 weeks. So because we couldn't get Scott's time, we started working on the part that we know how to work on, which is the conversion part, which that part is, you know, it all has to be done. And so if we had waited for him to come work on the bus before we started anything, we'd be here 2 years later with no conversion at all. So anyway, we started the part we knew how to do and got as far as we could, and we're super glad that we had Scott out. So how was it working with Scott and Kelly? Working with Scott and Kelly was amazing. So I asked him a million questions. He never seemed like he was irritated answering them. And really, he's just a wealth of knowledge. He doesn't come off as pretentious or, hey, I'm the boss and I know everything. He's just super friendly, super nice to work with, really hardworking. So he put in some long days and some long hours and just kind of kept after it. He advised me every step of the way when we came across a problem. I'd say, you know, what are the options? What can we do? What are the different things we can tackle? And every time he was like, look, here's what we can do. Here's what we can try. And so we tried a few things sometimes, and then there was several bolts we could not get out. And so they've been stuck in there for 55 years. They're not going to come out. And so there was several of those, and there was always a solution or a workaround. The brake chambers kind of tilt up, and so he had kind of made a way so that the brake chambers tilt up a little bit so it doesn't ride as hard on the actuator. And so there was several problems that we had, and he and Kelly are just a joy to work with. So we had a great time. I learned a ton about the bus. Michelle learned a ton about the bus. We were both there getting greasy. We're gonna throw away the clothes that we used while we were under there, but we both just had a really great time, and it was well worth the price that he asked. So we also just got along really well just as friends. Honestly, as soon as he came, we started working together. It felt like we'd known him for 10 years. You know, he came in and he's very warm, Kelly's very warm, and so honestly, we felt like we just made some lifelong friends. And so he's a pleasure to work with, and he's very knowledgeable, and was willing to tackle some of the hard problems. And really, we connected with them. It was funny, Michelle and I were commenting, because we worked a little bit on their truck as well, and so we would go back and forth, and we'd look at each other and it's like, hey, I always say that, or she always says that. And it was really funny. Just the dynamic between us was really great. So we had a great time with them. So honestly, we can't thank Scott and Kelly enough for coming out here and just being so gracious, and just honestly just working hard and being here with us. So if you do hire the Bus Grease Monkey, be prepared to wear some clothes that you're willing to throw away. So we literally wash the same set of clothes every day because they got so greasy and so dirty that they're trash. So be prepared to use some clothes that you're willing to throw away. The other thing is be prepared to learn a ton. Ask a ton of questions. Scott is a wealth of knowledge, and if he doesn't know, he'll ask. So he'll ask someone, or he'll bring it up in a forum, but most of the stuff he just kind of knew. Also, just be prepared to work pretty hard. Like, Scott works pretty hard, and everything on this bus is heavy. Everything on this bus is heavy, and everything is big, and everything is rusted or tight or hard to get to. But yeah, just be prepared to put in a hard day's work. We were sore literally every day. So, but honestly, it was great, and you won't be disappointed if you hire him to come look at your bus. So another cool thing about kind of having a big YouTube following like Scott has is we had several workers out here who just came out and wanted to hang out with us and wanted to help us with the bus. So we had several people who even came twice. So it was really great having them out here. The people that showed up were amazing, friendly, and just really kind people. So that part was super great as well, having people come out and help us. That was amazing. So again, we can't thank Scott and Kelly enough for coming out here and working on our bus.